thank you so much for the opportunity to come along and join you today. It's been the most exciting, fabulous, as Bill said, hubbubbly day. It's fabulous to hear so much conversation going on, and I hope I can be part of that for much longer. We've seen this image so many times, and it's fantastic that we've now got this additional ring on the end. And as Bill was saying, this morning we've really focused on the survive component, although lots and lots of conversations around thrive. And this afternoon, this is where we're going to place our attention now on the thriving component. We've got a fantastic range of sessions this afternoon that will really take us on this further journey around that thriving and onto recovery and survivorship, and really thinking about the needs of survivors and their key supporters or their family and close friends. We'll have some introduction to coping strategies, some challenges that people are facing, but also thinking about how we need to advance the science around recovery and survivorship, which is really important to helping us ensure that we are providing targeted and timely care for all. After the break, there'll be breakout rooms, and then I think the afternoon comes to a close at 4:30, and then I think many people will be returning for this evening for more conversation and discussion. So I've been invited to talk about the programme of research at Warwick, but actually I'm going to touch on a little bit of the research in Warwick and a big project that we're about to kick off with. But I think for me, this was an opportunity to really talk about developing the science behind recovery and survivorship. We're incredibly fortunate in this community that we've got people like Tom and Marco and other colleagues who are really pushing forward with the delivery of care because we know it's needed, we know it's important. We started to listen to the voices of survivors and their key supporters, and that's a really, really important place to be. But Adam alluded to how we develop our guidelines, and I know many of you in the room are part of that process, and we very much look to ILCOR, so the International Liaison Committee on Resuscitation, big international community that helped to bring together consensus standards or COSAR standards looking at the evidence base, so published research that helps to drive forward our guidelines. Probably about 2 years ago now, Tom, I approached Gavin Perkins, who's one of the chairs of ILCOR, and said, do you have anything around recovery and survivorship in ILCOR? Because ILCOR is our leading light in that evidence base. And he said, no, we don't. And they have task forces. So they have some fantastic task forces looking at basic life support, advanced life support, education, but nothing, absolutely nothing that spoke to survivorship and recovery and the needs of the community that we're here today. So we decided, I spoke to Tom, I spoke to Marco, I spoke to other colleagues to see if we could lobby to get a task force. We haven't been able to get a task force. We were afforded the opportunity, though, to establish a working group. So we have established the Cardiac Arrest Recovery and Survivorship Working Group that is an international endeavour of healthcare professionals, researchers, survivors and key supporters to help to really raise awareness within ILCOR of the need to engage with survivorship and recovery. We had several meetings together where we recognised what we've wanted to do to put forward an expression of interest or an action plan where we were wanting to lead on systematic reviews of evidence to help to create this evidence base. Now, whilst we have been listened to, unfortunately, the requirements from ILCOR for what we're able to do have kind of been trumped by the need to develop their understanding of how to engage more actively with members of the community. So this term, patient and public involvement or patient and public engagement, which is really, really important. So that's our first way in. So we are now working as a community to think about how we demonstrate to ILCOR how important it is to have the voices of survivors and members of the community at those tables. Somebody made a comment earlier on about the need to have information in a way that was accessible. And part of that is a communication back to ILCOR to say you're producing all of this fantastic guidance, but it's not accessible by the whole of the community. So that's our starting point with ILCOR. Hopefully, once we've demonstrated to them that we can do a good job there, they'll allow us to move into that world of systematic reviews and developing that evidence there. So I think that speaks to me about the importance of this developing and promoting the science around this area of recovery and survivorship, but ensuring that you guys are part of that journey. So I think that's where another really important gap is, that we need to not only listen to you, but encourage you to be part of that research, driving forward the research questions so that they have relevance to you, so that the research that we engage in, when we feed it back to you, it makes sense. It fits into your world. It fits into healthcare. Hi. Sorry, international, it's a bit of a mouthful. It's the International Liaison Committee on Resuscitation. It's like a big group of people from all over the world. But again, scientists, healthcare professionals, no survivors, no key supporters. Our group, we've got survivors, we've got key supporters, and we're always more than welcome to invite more people to be part of that. Thank you. Woo, I've done it again. Okay, so in 2020, the American Heart Association published this statement of survival. This very quickly fed into their guidelines in 2021, and it was here where we saw really the first published version of this extended chain of survival with this message around the importance of engaging with recovery. In the intervening years since then, there have been quite a large number of publications that have really highlighted the importance of listening to the patient, the survivor's voice, listening to the needs of key supporters, but also really highlighting the fact that we're not doing very well with regards to the way in which we're delivering on healthcare for key supporters, and that there's no designated care pathway for survivors and their key supporters. So in response, and again, I'll say to you as well, quite a few of us in this room have been championing and raising awareness around this for quite a few years. And I was talking to Paul, he's there, that I first met Paul and Tom in 2017, and we first started to try and get some funding to do some work around recovery and survivorship in 2017. We submitted a big grant in 2018. We finally got the funding for that grant at the end of last year. So it's not because we haven't been wanting to do this research. The F word, to borrow from Paul, is a real challenge in this area. But I want to share with you some funding that we've just secured to help us deliver on what we're calling the CARESS-F study. So it's a cardiac arrest, recovery enablement and supported self-management study, or CARESS. So why do we need this study? Why is it important? So as you know, and as we've heard already this morning, the NHS plan is all about, well, there's a big part of it about improving outcome following cardiac arrest with the intent to save an additional 4,000 lives by 2028. Of course, that's great news. That's really, really fantastic. But the way in which we define and think about outcome is really, really important. In the first instance, as we've understood this morning, survival is important. And for many, many years, much of the research we engaged with or delivered on focused on survival. Is the patient alive or are they dead? They're alive, brilliant. And then we moved on a little bit further to a clinician-reported outcome. Tom referred to this earlier this morning, something really crude like the CPC, which really tells you nothing about the quality of the life of the survivor. It tells you a clinician's perspective. They may not have even had a conversation with you, but you're doing okay and you can go out into the world. Now, one of the problems with that is that's how the research in this community has kind of developed. That often you read papers that tell you that the quality of life of survivors is great. When I first came into this community, so I'm a physio by background and I've worked in long-term conditions, in stroke, in musculoskeletal conditions, and it really shocked me that apparently the community of survivors all have a brilliant quality of life, and in many cases the same level of quality of life as the rest of the community, and I couldn't understand how that could be the case. And you only had to look a little bit below the surface to realise that it was because the way in which we were measuring outcome was wrong. We were basing it on really, really crude measures of assessment. Well, crude, survival, you survive, well done. But nothing beyond that. And if you dug a little bit beneath the surface, we were not seeking to better understand what matters to survivors, what matters to key supporters. And why that matters is, if you're using this evidence base to highlight where there are gaps in the delivery of care, we're not demonstrating any gaps in care, because we're saying that the life of survivors is great. They're all okay. They have no problems. So we have to step back and say, okay, let's talk to our community. Let's find out what's really going on. What are the outcomes that we really should be seeking to understand and using them to inform our research so we're telling the right message? So a little way towards the start of that was some work that we did a few years ago, working together with members of the cardiac arrest community as survivors and key supporters to help us. And we promoted the importance of including health-related quality of life as a core outcome, so a key measure of success in clinical trials moving forward. So we have survival, we have neurological function, because that's beloved by clinicians, but we have a survivor-reported outcome that allows us to better understand what matters, and that will help us to identify the gaps. So, why a new study? So I think, I hope this image kind of resonates with many of you. They are smiling quite a lot. I don't really understand why people are smiling hanging from a tent on the side of a cliff, but they are smiling. So maybe they're smiling because they survived. But we know there's this widespread failure of the delivery of healthcare for survivors of cardiac arrest. And we know from the qualitative work, from talking to survivors and pulling this all together, that once you go through that acute phase and you're discharged, it's like dropping off a cliff edge. That's the kind of language that people have described to us. And people are often left feeling very alone and often in a rather precarious state. They don't know where to go and what to do. So unless you're one of the fortunate ones who lives, well, apart from Paul, who clearly wasn't fortunate enough, but if you live near to Tom and Marco and you have access to care such as delivered by the Essex Cardiothoracic Centre, you are really struggling. Oops, sorry. So we need to do better. We need to develop the evidence around what care is needed, what that care looks like, and develop it in a way that provides that strong, immutable evidence base to inform our future guidelines. Our next guidelines are due to be published in 2025, so we need to be doing really well right now to get that evidence out there. So this is where we lead to Caress. So this has been funded by the National Institute for Health and Health Research as part of their Research for Patient Benefit programme. We've worked together with patients and survivors collaboratively in the development of this project, which means that we see you as equal members of our team, sitting at the table with us, telling us what's important. Paul and Stuart, where's Stuart? Stuart's over there, brilliant, are named collaborators on the bid, so they have an ownership of this programme of research moving forward. We also have a patient and public involvement group. We have a small group that helped us with the development of the project, but we're now in the process of extending this group. At this moment, I'd really like to introduce you to Nathan Pearson, Dr. Nathan Pearson, who's down here. Give us a wave, Nathan. So here's our new research fellow who will be helping me in delivering on this project. And only today we're really engaging with people. We've got Bernie and David and Assad and members of your community who are going to be helping us in helping and developing and delivering on this. This is intended to be an early programme of care, an early support programme of care. So as you heard Tom refer to earlier this morning, we're looking to how we can deliver it from very, very early stages post-cardiac arrest. What we'll be doing in this study is working with the community to really think about what is needed in this study and how we're going to deliver it. So who's involved? Sorry, I'm ahead of myself here. So we've got a core team of researchers, myself and Nathan, and we've got neurologists, intensive care, cardiologists who are all part of that team, and researchers and methodologists who are used to developing these kind of interventions and clinical trials that we're leading to. We've also got our public research partners. We have an external steering committee and our study participants that I've just referred to. We're also engaging with healthcare professionals and NHS managers to make sure that it makes sense. So the focus of the study, there are two key phases to this study. So it's a feasibility study because we want to know if we can do it. What does this study look like and can we deliver it? So the first stage, what does it look like? The second, can we deliver it in the NHS? So in forms of a flow chart, the colours haven't come up very well, sorry. These are the key stages, but I'm just going to focus on this a little bit more. So starting now, we are engaging with members of the community to help us to really think about what the components of the intervention would be. Nathan's currently conducting lots of systematic reviews, so looking at the published evidence, not only in cardiac arrest, but in related conditions, such as in stroke and traumatic brain injury and post-intensive care, to have a look at the different interventions that map and match to the experiences of survivors of a cardiac arrest and their key supporters. So I should just to clarify, this will be delivered for survivors and their key supporters. Once we've got that evidence together, and again, we're talking to our PPI group and our steering committee to make sure it's all making sense, we're going to go to whole day meetings with a further group, an extended group of survivors and key supporters to help us to better understand what we're finding in the literature. So again, what we're delivering makes sense. This is going to be a multifaceted program of care. So you've heard Tom and people talking this morning about all the different components of the areas of life that are affected. So we want to make sure there are elements within this intervention that speak to, for example, speech challenges that we're going to hear about later on, about cognitive challenges, about physical challenges, about the huge psychological and emotional impact of cardiac arrest. We're also going to be providing support that speaks to survivors and key supporters together, but also separately, because we know from talking to our community that often key supporters don't share their challenges, don't share their fears, don't share their worries if they're in the same room as a survivor. And I think, again, Tom alluded to this morning. So providing safe spaces where people can share and express their challenges and their needs will be part of this intervention. We'll also be talking to NHS managers and healthcare professionals, so again help us to explore what is needed and how it can be delivered. And once we've had those conversations, which will be starting in the new year, we'll then go to a large group meeting where people will all come together again to help us to finalise what this intervention will look like. So it's a bit like a jigsaw puzzle and bringing all those pieces together. I'm going to quickly whiz over this because this is just to show the underpinning to this kind of intervention. So in research speak, it's a complex intervention, but it has an underpinning that has strong roots in the psychological theory underpinning the behaviour change that is required and the support networks. And as you can see, we've got a component for survivors, a component for key supporters, thinking about the different elements that may be part of the intervention and how we're hoping to enact change and improvement in quality of life. Once we've got that intervention all together, we then need to run this feasibility study. So this is literally whether or not we can deliver this developed intervention in the NHS. So it's testing whether or not we can train the people that are going to be delivering it, recruit people into the intervention. Is it acceptable? Is it feasible? This is going to be run across 3 centres, which will be Coventry, University Hospital Coventry and Warwick, hospitals in the Birmingham area, and then Bristol. I should just say as well, just picking up on again, the work in Essex, the conversation and the development will allow us to understand, components that will be delivered individually, components that will be delivered group-wise, whether or not it'll all be delivered online, or whether or not there'll be a combination of online delivery or in-person activity. We've got a lot of expertise in Warwick with other similar interventions for stroke, for long COVID, for intensive care, that will help us again to develop that framework and respond to the way in which these interventions are more currently being delivered. And a lot of that is online. Just to reiterate the collaborative working, so the patient engagement group or the public research partners that I alluded to earlier on will be helping us through each stage of the study to ensure that the experiential evidence, that their experience of living with cardiac arrest or being a key supporter helps to inform constantly the way in which we're thinking about the study. So what will CARESF achieve? So moving on from the tent hanging on the side of the cliff, we hope that CARESF will help us to develop an intervention and an early care support programme that provides that support network in a safe space for survivors and their key supporters to feel that they are being supported appropriately. And once we feel we've got that intervention right and we can deliver it at a small scale within the NHS, we'll then be looking to a larger RCT to see if we can roll it out on a much larger scale. So right now, we're extending our public research partner group with survivors and key supporters. They're working with Nathan now to really get that as a strong group. In the beginning of the new year, we'll be recruiting for stage 1, and we'll be endeavouring to hold research workshops in January, February time. So we'll be reaching out to SC UK to invite people to come and get involved in that. And then stage 2, which will be the feasibility study, will start in the spring, early summer of next year. So thank you for your attention. Really happy to share this upcoming piece of work with you, and I'm happy to take any questions.